Ah, no sound. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. Sorry about the audio. Um, I was in the habit of not muting my mic, and then at the end of it, you would get you would hear me chittering afterwards. So I apologize. Anyway, let's start again. So welcome everybody to this Vectric live event, and those of you who've been here before, you know what's going to happen. Anybody that's new here, I'll tell you what's going to happen. I am going to actually go through a project with you, and yeah, everybody's giving me this no sound thing. I'm sorry. Anyway, so it was muted. Anyway, so those who are new to this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to present a project, and if you have any questions during this project, please throw them up in the chat room, and we will get to those. If they pertain to this project in general, or specifically, excuse me, then I'll answer those questions. Thank you, Ollie. If they're out of the scope of this particular project, then Becky, the wonderful Becky, is in our chat room right now, and she will take those on. And we have another a couple other Vectric staff that are there on hand as well. So we're going to answer your questions. If we don't get to your questions for whatever reason, then please put them in the comments below after this event, and we will answer them. And if you need an answer clarified, then again, just put a little note in the bottom, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. So it's beautiful, sunny here, like I mentioned earlier that you didn't hear, but it's beautiful and sunny here. Really hot in here. It's like a little sauna in my conservatory. So I'm going to try and get through this so I don't melt away on you guys. And we'll see what happens. Okay? So every time we go to do one of these projects, we look for inspiration. And I raided Becky's Pinterest board this time around and found a game that I thought looked kind of neat. And this was it right here. It looked like something that I didn't know what it was at the time. It looked like something that we could easily make with a CNC, but also lots of fun. And we could make a few updates to make it a little bit, I'm going to say, better. And then also we could take it a bit farther if we wanted to in the end. So this felt like a really good project to work with. Now, after doing a little more work into this, I found out this game was actually called Pucket. But there are other versions of it. There's Passé Trappé, I guess it must be French, a version of it as well. So it is around, and I feel that this would be a good one to see if we could remake with our CNC. Now, when I did look into this, there seemed to be a lot of different ideas about the rules of this game. So I'm going to give you sort of the two versions that I read about, and hopefully you guys kind of come up with your own version of it, or you can hang your hat on one of those. One of them was you have two different color pucks, and whoever gets rid of all of their pucks first, that means they're on the other side of the board after you shoot them through the little goal in the middle using the bungee cord. You pull back and you kind of fling them through. Once yours are all over there, then you win the game. The other version that I saw was a little bit different, where as soon as you didn't have any pucks on your side, then you would win. So I guess you can make up your own rules if you'd like to, but those are the two different versions that I happened to find. And so let's talk a little bit more about how I went about deciding how I was going to tackle this job. So taking a look around the internet, I found lots of different versions of this. This happens to be a really rustic version. Looks like it was made by one by twos or 1x1s or something like that, 1x2s. And very functional, looks really great, and it'll be lots of fun, I'm sure. Then there was more of these polished versions that had nice polished wood. Looked like someone took a lot of time to kind of finish these up as a proper object they could have in their house, which I thought was kind of neat. And I also found out that there was tons of different sizes. There's not one particular size. So for Don Pierce, who earlier said he just got a brand new CNC, good for him, then he could make this whatever size he wanted to, pretty much. So you can go ahead and size this up. So knowing all of that, I had to go about finding an actual plan online or plans online. And I found, again, a myriad of different sizing, different ways of building this thing. So I had to go through and develop my own sort of plan. So I took out my old sketchbook like I always do, and I started out sort of mixing and matching some of these things. I started out by deciding how I wanted to build the board, and that was sort of important. I like the idea of these rabbit joints, I think that's what you call them at the end. It would make it nice and clean. I thought it'd be fun if the center goal could be pulled out, not just stay in there. Maybe it could be replaced with something else. And then I also thought a little bit about the actual way it was going to all get assembled. So The next thing, like I'd said, I thought it would be kind of interesting if I had a removable center. So I thought with the top version, a little more complicated with the two, I guess we're going to call them goals, okay, the two goals. It may actually make it easier, but I'm really not sure. And then the normal one, which has the one hole, and off we go. So that should be all right. Those who are a little bit behind, you might not hear any audio if you're way behind in time, if the lag is there, because at first when I started up, I forgot to turn my mic on. So anyway, but it should come in sooner or later. So we have those two versions of the slot in thing that slides in and out. And the next bit, I thought that I didn't like the way that some of the different versions just tacked the bottom board to the bottom of the actual frame, we could call it. So I thought if we created a channel where we could slide in the bottom board, then that would be kind of a nice way to finish it, along with give you something to hold on to if you're trying to carry it around. There's a little lip on the bottom, which would be kind of nice. And also, as an extra bonus, if you wanted to add any V-carving to the actual backboards, that would look really kind of slick in the end, I thought. And then I did a little bit of thinking about the actual pucks. Now, at first, I had the idea to bevel the top and the bottom of the puck. It seemed like a good idea at first, but then I saw some videos of people playing Pucket, and they did a lot of flicking. And if the bevel was there, then I thought maybe the bungee cord would get stuck underneath it and it would flip around. And so I decided against that, but I stuck with my main idea of having the top bit flat so you could add some V-carving. Now, like I said, there are two different kind of sets of rules. So you could use two different kinds of wood for each of so each side has 8 of these pucks. So you could do 8 in darker wood and 8 in the lighter wood, or you could do them all of the same wood, which is what I chose to do, but put V-carving in the top so you could tell the difference. And again, depending on your rules, it might really not matter in the end what you choose to do. And then the last bit, I wanted to actually figure out what materials I was going to use. Now, again, like I'd said, I love my sketchbook. I use it all the time, and I drew, or I decided to think a little bit about the sizing of the material I was going to use. So the bottom we made out of 1/4 inch plywood. Of course, you can change that for whatever you want. It doesn't need to be that at all. The sides I thought would be 1 inch or 3/4 of an inch. In the end, I decided 3/4 of an inch all the way around. I thought that would be a good thickness. The center is going to be the same as the side, so 3/4 inch. And then the pucks are going to be about 1.5 inches round by 1/2 inch thick. And again, I couldn't really find any real rules about the size of these, so I just kind of went with what I thought was going to be the best. Now, I'm going to talk through the files for this. We're going to start out looking at my working file. This is the file that I already created, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this file. I'm going to point out a couple things, but the main thing I want you to understand is that most of the important bits happen in the tooling for this, not particularly in my drawings. So I'll go through my drawings, but I do want you to remember that the tooling is really where all the magic happens, where you can size parts up to fit in together and make sure everything works right together for you. Now, again, we're in lockdown here, so I haven't cut this. Again, that's another reason why I'm not going to spend as much time on the drawing as I am the tooling, because you might want to cut this and you're going to need to know how to modify those tool paths to work best for you, your machine, and the materials that you're going to use. Okay, so that's the main sort of point of this. So let's go right to my working file. Now, I am going to do this in VCarve desktop. It can be, the files are compatible that you can download after this is done, are compatible for VCarve Pro and Aspire. And also, as an aside, you can load them into Cut 2D. They'll work perfectly with the exception of the V-carving. So just keep that in mind. So if you are a Cut 2D user, you can open them up. You won't be able to modify the V-carving any, but certainly you can play around with the other things that you're going to see. Now, so let's have a look at the actual working file that I've got here. So I'm going to leave myself up for a lot of this on screen because I'm going to talk a lot during it, and I like to use my hands, and I think it's going to be important to illustrate some things with that, okay? And if I happen to get overlapping something that's important, I'll turn me off and turn me back on again. Okay, so anyway, let's do this. So let's open up the working file for this. You're going to get 3 files with this, by the way. You're going to get the working file, a boards cut file and a bottom cut file. And I'm giving you this file in particular so you know how my process works. If you've been to the last user group meeting that I was at, and we made the car, or I guess it was the Christmas thing, sorry. It was one of the 12 Days of Christmas project. It was the little toy car. I like to show you how I develop the end file for cutting. And it all starts out with, of course, using a setup in VCarve or whatever I'm using. And then I take that out and I actually create my cut files. Robert, you're late, way to go. Okay, so let's just go ahead and make sure that you read and understand all of this that's here. And we're gonna click OK and go by that. So this file already has a whole pile of layers already set up in it for you. They're all color coordinated and ready to go. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start off just by talking about the file setup and then how I came up with some of the basic sort of underpinning for how to build the actual boards around this, okay? So what we're going to do is, so let's take a look at the job setup. So it's a single-sided job. Now, because this is I have to apologize too, I've got a very squeaky chair today. I don't know why, but I guess, so if you hear the squeaks in the chair, I'm really sorry. It's a single-sided job. This file, like I said, is purely just for me to get the vectors the right size 2D. So really, all I need is a single-sided job. I need the proper X and Y dimensions. I don't need to worry too much about the thickness. I just chose 3/4 of an inch, maybe because it happened to be there. I'm not sure why it's there, but it happened to be there. It's in inches. This does not matter, but I set it up for the way I like to work. So I'm going to zero off my material surface, and I'm always going to start in the middle of my job. As you know, I like to do that. And because there's no 3D content in this job, we can go ahead and use the standard modeling resolution, because there is no 3D content. But if you do want to use some 3D content, maybe you want to put something nice on the backboards or sideboards, then definitely you're going to want to think about upping that to probably the very high resolution, okay? And Canadian maple, of course, no idea why. It's just a nice wood, right? Nice wood. Okay, so we're going to go, okay. So this first box that we're going to see here, and you'll see that the layer that we're on is called bottom. Now this is a bird's eye view of the actual board. And so if I select that box or rectangle and I press T on the keyboard, you'll see that it's 20 by 16.5. I chose that size because I think one of the versions I looked at, that was what it was. So I felt that would be a good way to start. And we're going to show you, or I'm going to show you how I made the boards for this. And then we're going to skip on to the rest of the stuff. But I think this is important, and I'm going to show you a quick little tip on how you can make these properly. So I'm going to take this box vector, again, being bird's eye view, and we are going to go ahead and offset inwards 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so we're going to go inwards 3/4 of an inch. And this is going to define the actual can't type and talk at the same time, the actual thickness of my boards. And we're going to click offset, and we are going to select the new one, and off we go. Okay, so there we have it. That's going to be the inside of our actual playing surface. Now to create these rabbit joints that I want, and I think that's what they're called, is rabbits, I wanted to make sure that I had the cutout proper. Now I want to tell you that this is purely for me visually to see what's going to happen. This actual vector that we're going to create, I'm never going to use for tooling. It's just there for me visually to make sure that this is going to fit together properly. So if I grab my rectangle tool, and you'll see up here that I have my toggle geometry snapping on. So if I just go ahead and drop this in here, you'll see that I get a nice little rectangle right there. And if I draw it here and I snap on that corner and go down to the bottom, I have another one right there. Okay, so let's just go ahead and close that down. And I double clicked by mistake at the end of that, so I got an extra bonus one I didn't need. Just delete that out of there. Now let's take these two rectangles, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to move those to their own layer. I'm going to call this working, and I'm going to call it delete. That way I can delete it. You won't get this actual layer, it's just for me. So I make that an active layer, and we're going to click OK. So there we have that, and I'm going to go ahead now and drop down my layers, and we'll turn off the bottom. So I don't need to see that anymore. All I want is these two vectors here to start with. So I want this actual cutout to be in this top sideboard here. I want my actual rabbit, I guess, to be there. I think somebody said something about rabbit. Robert, oh no, Mark Lindsay did, thank you. Rabbit. And it's rebate. Oh, that's right. I've heard rebate before too. So we're going to make the rebate in this one here, okay? So what I want to do is I want to make the hole or the cutout in that half of the thickness of my material. Okay, so I'm going to have that selected, that rectangle selected, press T on the keyboard, and we're just going to simply make sure that my link X and Y are unselected, and we are going to subtract 0.75 of an inch from the height of that and click apply and then close. Now it shrunk at both ends by half of that, so it's going to be right in the center of this rectangle right here, which is really quite nice. And now what I want to do is I want to subtract this rectangle away from this top one. A couple different ways we can do that. We're going to use the same tool, but there's a couple different methods we can use, okay? If this rectangle here was a throwaway vector, I didn't need it anymore, I don't want that anymore, then I could simply hold down my shift key, select these two boxes, and use the subtract. So what this is going to do, it's going to subtract my second vector away from my first vector. So if I click that, you'll see what happens. I lose my original vector, or one of them, and I'm just left with the result, which in some cases, like I said, that's fine. But for me, that's not okay. I want to undo that. So again, if I select those two again, and I hold down my shift key, but I keep it held down, I haven't let go yet, and I do the subtract, you'll see that I get the result of that, but I keep both my vectors, which is fantastic. Works really well. So I have that, I'm ready to go. Now what I want to do is do the same to the other end of that top one. So I'm going to hold down my control key. So I'm just going to mirror this across. So I'm going to hold down my control key, my shift key. So holding down the control key is going to make a copy. Shift is going to mean copy along the center line. And then if I hold or click H on my keyboard, it will go horizontal, H, and there I have it on the other side. So then what I can do now is I can hold down my top, and I can hold down my shift key again, keeping it held down, select that second vector, and I can go ahead and subtract. And there we have it, I'm off to the races. And now I can select that top one that I've already rebated, and I can hold down my control, my shift, and my V key, and I can copy that to the bottom. And there I have all of my sideboards. Now, I see some people having some problem with their video, but others seem to be okay. So I think everything is all right. I'm going to keep going on until I get more people saying that's not working, but I haven't had any warnings at my end of things that things have gone bad. So we're just going to keep going with this. Okay, so that's that. So what we're going to do now is I don't need those anymore. I've explained how I made those sideboards. So let's just go ahead and turn that off. Let's go to the top of my layers manager, turn back on bottom, make sure I have that selected, and off we go. So I can now go ahead and show my sideboards that I made, and you'll see right there, there's the sideboard, and then the bottom, or the backboards, excuse me, have the two gray backboards that are there for us, okay? They're great. Now I'm gonna hide those for a second because I don't wanna see those right now. So again, we're gonna hide those, and I'm just gonna show you my bottom insert. Now, this is the actual board that I'm going to cut. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I figured. Oh, sorry, I'm going to show you how I figured out the dimensions of that. Sorry, I keep hitting my microphone. How to do that. So what I did is I took this inside vector, and I knew that the way I'm going to create my sideboard is I'm going to use one vector, and I'm going to run a profile cut along there with a 1/4 inch end mill, and I'm going to cut that out because I'm hoping that the 1/4 inch material that I'm going to fit into the bottom is going to fit in there nicely. I'm going to show you later how to change that if I'm wrong, okay? So just assume that that's all going to work out just perfect. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure that my bottom insert is slightly smaller than the actual finish recess that I'm going to have around the outside edge of all this. So we take this inside vector, and I offset this inside half of the thickness of my material. And if you can't do the quick mental math, then you can just put divided by 2 in here, and press the equals key on your keyboard, and it will do the math for you, which is fantastic. We're going to go outwards, and we're going to select our new, create sharp corners. That's great. We're going to offset that. And if I zoom in just a little bit, you'll see that actually the recess is going to go deeper, and my panel should fit in there nicely. So that's going to work out all right, okay? In theory. Again, I haven't cut this, so that's up to you guys to figure that out for me. But that should work out okay. So there's my bottom, and that's how I figured out how to do that sizing of that. Okay, so I just sized that vector that you saw in just a little bit, and I knew that it was going to fit in there. Okay, let's close that down, and let's now go back and take a look. We'll turn back on our sideboards, and then we'll zoom out a little bit here. We'll zoom over zoom out a bit. Okay, great. So now, let's go ahead and take a look at our next layer, which is going to be our center. This is our center of the table, and this is the part that, like I said, I think it'd be kind of fun if you could pull out and remove and put a different one in there, maybe to make it a little more complicated, or maybe even easier, or make it even bigger if you want to make the hole bigger if you felt it was too complicated. And so this is the rectangle, and all I did was just copy my backboard, which I called the ends the backboards. I copied one of those to the center, which is the same size and everything, and then I drew what I wanted my channel to be, or the goal to be in there. And in this case, if I press T on the keyboard, you'll see that it's the thickness of the material, obviously 3/4 of an inch, and the height of it is 2 1/4 inches tall. So that's how wide my goal is going to be, which I think is going to be okay, because as we discussed earlier, the pucks are 1.5 inch in diameter and 1/2 inch thick. So that should be all right for the width anyway. Again, when I looked around at different boards, the sizes were all over the place for this, so I'm going to show you later how to fix that as well if you don't feel that this is the right size and so on, but it should be for my game anyway. Okay, so let's close that down, and we have that in. Now you're going to notice too that I'm going to need to cut a channel into the sideboards of this game so I can slide this in and out, and I'll show you that in a minute how I did that. But I just wanted to make sure, like I said, when I draw these out, that everything is perfect just the way it is. Now let's have a look at the rest of the vectors. I've got the Bungie holes. Okay, those are the holes that the Bungie cords are going to fit into. I just guessed at 6mm or 1/4 inch Bungie cord. You look around, there's all kinds of different thicknesses of them, but I thought that would be okay. And the location seemed to be all right. Again, I had to kind of guess, but I thought that was going to be pretty good where they were. And then we're going to take a look at the pucks. And those are the two different pucks that I have here that we're going to use. Okay, we have two different pucks. I'm going to use two different versions, and I laid out my actual V carving that I thought I might do on the top and the bottom, which I thought H for home and A for away, but you could use V's or you could use whatever you want it to be. Or if you're going to use different kinds of material, then again, you don't even need to worry about V carving them. But I thought it'd be kind of fun, at least to show you that anyway. Okay, now if I zoom out, something else that's unique about this file, and like I always do with these files, is because it's a file that I'm going to use to create the tooling, then you'll see up top that you have what I call the blowout of my actual sides here. And you'll see right there that I've got the bottom, okay, let's pull that aside. I've got the two centers, they're right there for me. I've got the backboard with the line that I'm going to use to do the actual profile cut, and I'll show you in a second, all that. And then I have my sideboards along with these rectangles, which are really just extruded off of the actual plan here. Again, they're not going to be used for anything right now. They're just there to help me decide what I'm going to do with my tooling once I get there. And then we have our Bungie holes. Now, let's talk about these for a second. Again, I'm just guessing at how high they need to be off the, once I profile this out, if this is going to be high enough. So it's about 1/4 inch higher than the actual board surface. I felt was going to be okay. I saw some different boards in the videos that I saw. They seem to be quite close to the board. So I thought that would be adequate for this particular one. But again, this file, you can make your own. You can move those wherever you want to move them and make changes that you would like. So that would be perfect. Okay. And I put this vector here, this rectangle here, because this is where the actual recess is going to be cut in my sideboards for my center. Now, when we talk about these centers, actually, just before I get that far, these vectors here, the way I decided how high they would be is that I just decided 1/4 inch of material, and then I'm gonna have my 1/4 inch of my recess there. I suppose depending on what material you're going to use, you may want to increase or decrease that space by a little bit, but you're going to need to sort that out, which you will have all the tools that you need to do that when I'm done. So let's talk for a second about these actual center bits. Okay, if I drag this sort of traditional center one down to on top of here, just grab this corner, you'll see that it's actually shorter. So it's not as tall as the sideboards, and it's shorter by the distance of the bottom lip, the actual recess that I'm going to create in the end. And this will, in the end, if everything's perfect, make sure that the top of that goal, again, if you will, is flat across the top and nice and nice and flat without having to do any sanding, okay? If you decide that you want to put a thicker material in there for your bottom, you're going to need to decide whether or not you're going to move this vector down or what you're going to do there, or if you're actually going to shorten this up a little bit, okay? Just to make sure everything lines up perfect. Let's just undo that move there for a second. Now, with regards to the actual goal, if I draw a rectangle, that's the size of that puck, which is going to be 1.5 inches by a ½ inch, then you'll see that I created these, the score or the goal is about 3/4 inch tall, and then I radiused the corners at the top, mainly because they're not going to cut as sharp points because I'm going to use a round tool in there. So I thought that at least if I illustrated it that way, I would know what I want to get into in the end. And also I wanted to make sure that I avoided that by the height of my puck. I don't want it to get jammed in there if somebody flings it really hard. I didn't know if that would be a problem or not. So I ended up just radiusing those a little bit so it makes them nice and round. And then it seems to be pretty fair that you should be able to fit a puck in there. Even if your accuracy is a little bit off, you still should be able to get it in there. And these two are exactly the same size. They're just doubled up across the actual center bit, okay? So I think overall, that's pretty much all that I need to show you in this particular file, okay? Again, once you get these, you can take a look at it, you can dissect my work, you can get in there, you can make things bigger, smaller, change things up a bit. But the one thing I want you to remember is that what I needed to do was I had these all on their layers, so when you copy and paste them into your actual cut file, all of those layers are all sort of kept, so they all get to keep the same colors and so on where they need to be, which is kind of nice and helpful. Okay, so let's go ahead and have a look at the next bit. So there are two cut files that I'm going to include along with this. There's the one which is, that you see here, which is the actual cutting the boards, the backboard, the sideboards, the actual centers, and then the pucks. Now again, I'm assuming that you're going to want to cut these, or I'm going to want to cut these, are all the same kind of wood. So this all works fine for me with the V carving on the top, so I don't need to worry about different colors. Obviously I could stain them, I suppose. I never thought of that. I could stain those pucks different colors, which would work okay in the end. And then the next file is going to be the actual cutting of the bottom of this, okay? And with this, you can obviously make this your own. You can change whatever you want to, but it's going to come with a little VPuck logo on there. You can V-carve in and the size of that, and I'll show you the very basic tooling that comes along with that. But again, the most important thing we're going to look at here is going to be the cut file for the boards, the centers, and then also the pucks, okay? So let's go back to our software. We're going to close this one down. We're not going to save that off, and we're going to go ahead and open up a new file, and this is going to be the boards cut file. Open that up. And again, make sure you read and understand the notes that are there. We had a comment last time around about how to get the notes to pop up. That's easy. If you start a notes, if you go to the notes section, let me just hide myself for a second here. If you go up to, we have to click OK first. If you go up to edit and you see notes here, as long as your notes start off with a period or a full stop, then it will pop up every time you every time you open up your file. It's great if you need to leave notes and comments for somebody else who might be using your file like we do. Okay, so make sure you read and understand that and adjust the tooling for your machine, your tools on hand, and the material you're cutting into. Okay, bring myself back up again. Okay, so let's take a drink of water. Hope everything's going okay. I'll try and go through this, but I'm going to slow down a little bit because I think there's some important stuff here that you're going to want to think about when you cut this for yourself. So let's go ahead and have a look at the actual layers that we have. Like I said, what I did when I created this file, it's the same size job, okay? But I made sure that my material thickness was proper, which is 0.75 of an inch, okay? So I kept it the way it was. And when I copied when I copied all those vectors at the top into this job, it automatically gave me all of my layers that I needed, the layers that they were on in the last file. And then all I had to do was just hand sort of sort these out where they need to be in the end. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to, yeah, I like that, Mark. Great idea. Great idea. So what I'm going to do is, so I lost my train of thought. yeah, so anyway, so I copied them over and then I sorted them out on the page, and then off I went where I want. I had enough room between all the parts. Okay, so let's just go ahead and close that down, and let's bring up our tool paths. And if, by the way, you'll see that on the screen here that I kind of lost part of my job underneath my toolpaths tab. If I press F on my keyboard, it will fit all of my components into the visual space that I can see. So it's a nice little tip for you to have. Just press F and you can see everything that you need. Along with it recenters it in your main window, not underneath the toolpath stuff. Now we have all of our different toolpaths here, and we're going to work through them one at a time. And I'm going to go through some of the changes I want you to consider if you decide to go ahead and cut this. Again, I wish that we had access to the CNC at the office, but we don't. So I'll need to assume that you're going to take a look at this and change things the way that you need them, along with fix anything that I may have messed up on, which I hope I haven't, but we'll see. Okay, so here we go. Let's take a look at the bottom channels, okay? So these are the channels that we're going to actually cut into the bottom of the sideboards and the backboards, okay? As I said earlier, I decided that I was going to use a profile cut for this. So I want to show you something before I show you the toolpath for that, is I actually took and extended those vectors out of the end of that rectangle, half of the diameter of my tool, or a little bit over half the diameter of my tool. That way, when my tool comes out, I'm not going to be left with any radiuses at the end of that channel. Okay, so I need to overshoot that by just a hair, and so I decided to work that into my tooling. So that's why it's a little bit longer than what it should be. So I'll press F on the keyboard, Todd. So now if I go ahead and double click on that, you'll see that it's a basic profile toolpath, nothing too special. Start depth of 0, top of my material. We're going to cut down, like I said, half the thickness of my material, which is great. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill, which is perfect. We're going to go on the line. Now that's important to remember because even I forgot to do that when I created this the first time around and was wondering why things didn't quite look right in the end. So make sure you have on the line selected. We don't need to worry about a separate last pass. There's no tabs. Don't need to worry about ramps and so on in there. And we're just going to rename the toolpath and we're going to calculate that. And then we'll preview, like always, our visible toolpaths to make sure we get what we hope we're going to get in the end. And that's exactly what I'm hoping for. Now, here's the kicker. What if your tool is smaller than the material you're going to put in there? This profile cut won't work for you. So how can we go ahead and modify this tooling so that we can use a little different toolpath method and also make the hole bigger? Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to reset my preview, close that down, go back to my 2D view, and we're going to select this top vector. Now I could select them all, but we're just going to focus on this top one for right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to consider using a pocket, okay, instead of a profile for this. So if I do that, I'm just going to hide myself here for a second. With that vector selected, I'm going to offset it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset both sides. So that's going to offset it the top and also the bottom. But I'm going to do it half of the diameter of my tool. So I'm going to use a 1/4 inch end mill. So I'm going to do that 0.125. And we're going to make sure we have sharp corners. And we're going to, doesn't matter, don't need to delete the original. We'll offset that. And now I get these two vectors. Now this is the actual 1/4 inch wide. Okay? So what I can do now is I can select those both. I can right click on those. And I can join with a smooth curve. And you'll see at the end now, I get this round end, which is great. But the other end is still open if we look over the other side here. So if I right click on that again, I can close that with a smooth curve. Now what I can do is I can create a pocket toolpath instead. Okay, so that way I'm not limited by the size of my tool. I can make this as big or as small, or well, as big as I would like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a pocket toolpath. We'll create a brand new one here, and we're going to make this cut depth is going to be 0.75. Again, you can do your math always in these, right inside these boxes by, 0.75 divided by 2, press the equal sign. There's the result. That's the depth I'm going to go down. And in this case, I'm going to use a bit of pocket allowance. Now, last week when Rebecca did, we had a great question about why is the pocket allowance here different than what it is in the inlay toolpath. And she put a great answer on last week's video. So if you want a little bit longer description, from her, then you'll see it there. But essentially with the inlay toolpath, we ignore the positive and minus. We always make the female part bigger than the male part, okay? So it always gets bigger no matter what. So that's important to remember, okay? But here, we're gonna use a negative allowance and that will make our part a little bit bigger, okay? So if we make this, let's say minus 0.05, and we'll delete that out of there. That's really too much, but that's all right. This is going to be good for our illustration. If we go back to our 2D view and I turn on my solid preview, you'll see that I'm overshooting that vector by that allowance that I put in there. And that will make that actually a little bit thicker. So I have a little more wiggle room to slide my material in. So if you find out that your 1/4 inch tool really isn't a 1/4 inch, it's more like 0.235 or something like that, and your material that you're going to slide in for your bottom is an actual 1/4 inch, then you're going to need to use this method to modify this job and make these pockets instead of profiles. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that to do. So we'll close that down. I'm going to delete that out of there, and I'm going to delete those vectors out of there. Don't need those anymore. And we'll go back, resume our regular tool pathing here. Okay, so now we've got our bungee holes. This is the same thing as we did a minute ago. Okay, this is a very basic pocket tool path. Instead of me bothering or to do the math here, what I've done is I put in a bit of a placeholder. I put in Z, which tells or Z, which tells the software to use the material thickness and add 0.02 to that. What's great about this particular setup is if I go and change my material thickness, then I don't need to go in and change all of these numbers because it's all right there, as long as I still want to go that same extra depth, right? I'm going to use my 1/4 inch end mill. And then I'm going to do an offset tooling, which will make it do the old spirals. And then if I want to make these bigger, so right now, like I said, they're actually 1/4 inch or it's a little bit over 6 millimeters in diameter. If I want to make that bigger, I can give this a slight negative offset and it'll make those holes a little bit bigger. So once you figure out what kind of cord you're going to use, then you can change up these holes to be whatever size they need to be, okay? So we're going to leave it just like that for now. It's not a big deal. And we'll calculate that. And then we're going to go ahead and preview that visible tool path. We'll preview our last one because I reset that. And there we go. That's what we have after those 2 tool paths run. Let's close this down now. The next thing we're going to take a look at the corner joints. Now, what I did was when I copied in those vectors from before, I had those rectangles there that I said that I were just there for reference, and they were there for reference because I needed to change those, and I knew I needed to change those when I actually create the rabbets for these, okay? What I decided to do was to, rabbets, I needed to offset the tool path or the pocket that I make, bigger top and bottom in either left or either right, depending on what end of this side panel I'm in. I couldn't use just a basic allowance. I had to use something else. So what I did was I actually sized up the vector. So I sized it up, top and bottom, by half the diameter each way of my tool, so 0.125. And then I slid it out a little ways. I just kind of guessed. I'm not going to lie to you. I just kind of guessed at how far I wanted to go. That way I wouldn't be left with any of those kind of little round extra bits of material there. I like that we're having a bit of a discussion about the rabbits or rabbit or rebate or whatever it is. I like that. Anyway, sorry. So I wanted those to go away. So using this particular method, I could control that I only wanted it to get the pocket to get bigger top and bottom and then to the left or to the right. So that's why I did that. So if we go ahead and we look at my tooling for that. Oh, sorry. Let's just double click on that. You'll see that I'm going to go down half the depth of my material that I have. Sorry for stuttering. Half the material. I'm using a 1/4 inch end mill. I'm using my offset tooling. I'm not using any pocket allowance, none whatsoever. I've already taken care of all that already. And I'm just going to rename it corner joint.pockets. We'll calculate that and I can preview that visible tool path. And you'll see that it looks like what it's supposed to look like. But when you go to your 2D view, and if I turn on that tool path, and I have the solid preview on, you'll see what I'm going to get here in the end is I am going to get those little radius bits are going to be past my material at the top. They're going to be outside the end here. So I'm going to have a nice, when I do my profile cut at the end, I'm going to have a nice clean pocket that I can put I can make my joint with, right? Okay, so that worked out perfect, I think, in the end. Let's close that, hide that, and let's have a look at our center. Now this is another one of those that I had that vector at first to kind of illustrate where the center needed to butt into the side. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to overshoot it top and bottom, but then I wanted to be able to control in my toolpath the width of that. Okay, so I made the rectangle half the diameter of my tool, taller on the top and lower on the bottom, right? So up we went. And then what I did was in the actual tool path, I changed my pocket allowance. So now, depending on how wiggly I want this to be, I can go ahead and change my pocket allowance if I would like. And also, I can control my depth of this. So what I did was I went down just a little bit farther than halfway through. That way I can pull out the center bit if I want to. I'm going to use my end mill. I'm going to make sure that I use the offset tooling. And then I got my pocket allowance, like I said earlier. And then we can go ahead and we can calculate that. And we can preview that visible tool path, take a look at our 2D view, turn on our solid preview, and make sure we have our, there we are. And you'll see what happens now is I'm overshooting the sides of that a little bit to make sure that I can slot a little wiggle room, and then I can actually pull it out because it's actually overshooting the ends of this. So that's kind of nice. I don't have little hooks in there to lock it in there or get in the way. What's nice about this is depending on how wiggly I want that middle thing to be, if I want it to be loose or maybe it's too loose because when you hit it with the pucket rattles, then what I can do is I can tighten that up a little bit to make sure that it's not going to be too floppy. Also, if you decide that you don't want that piece to be removable in the end, then you don't need to worry about that at all. Just give it a little bit of an allowance and then you don't need to worry about it whatsoever. You can just glue it in place or nail it in there, whatever you're going to do, and off you go. Okay, so that's that one out of the way. And did we preview that? I forget. Oh, we did. Okay, great. Let's close that down. And let's look at our next one, which is our pucks. Now, I'm actually going to come back to this one later because I want to point something out to you. And this is just a little thing that may bug you, may not bug you, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. It bugs me sometimes. We're going to skip over the V-carving, and then we're going to do our cutouts. Nothing special about this. It's a basic profile cutout. I added in some tabs, some things to note about my tabbing. Where I decided to put them was that there will be some pieces that won't be tabbed in. So if you have a vacuum system, it's just going to suck those out of there, I hope. But be careful, they are there. If you're worried about that, then you can just drag these tabs around so that it hooks up to that middle piece a bit better. So you can decide your tab placement on your own. I just chose those because they seem to work. And off we went. So nothing special about this. I'm going to go down the thickness of my material plus a little bit extra. I'm going to outside my tooling, outside my vectors, like always, it's a profile cut. No big deal. I added in my tabs and I placed those where they needed to be. And then I'm going to go ahead now and I rename my tool path and we can calculate that, which I already had calculated, but it tells me that I want to pass through my material. So that's okay because I don't mind hitting my spoil board. Then we can preview that visible tool path. And there we have the end result. So you can see that now we have all of our channels in there nicely. We have that center channel for our center to go in and out. And then I have my pucks all cleaned off there on not really cleaned off on the top, but they're all cut out. So I haven't actually cleaned away the surface that I'm going to use. So let's get into that now, okay? Let's take a quick look at the actual pucks. This is my puck tool path. Let's go back to my 2D view for a second. You'll see that I have all those vectors selected. No big deal. This is going to cut away 1/4 inch of my the material away. So it's going to leave my puck a 1/2 inch thick, right? No problem. 1/4 inch end mill. That's all good and everything. It's an offset tooling. Pretty basic stuff. And we're going to go ahead and calculate that, and then we'll preview that visible tool path. And here's what I wanted to point out. If this bugs you, I'll show you how to fix it. If it doesn't bug you, then let's not worry about it. But you see these little raised pixels that are left behind. The chances are really, really good, almost 100%, that you're not even going to see these in the finished cut. But if you were showing this to a customer and you're walking them through the tooling of this and you didn't want those showing, then easily get rid of that by just going in and adjusting that pocket tool path, again, by using a slight negative allowance. Doesn't have to be all that much, just enough to be able to go outside that vector a bit or recalculate that. We'll preview that visible tool path and boom, they're gone, nice and clear, and everything looks really great. So we can get rid of those little fingers a little bit by just over cutting just a hair. Okay, close those down. And then we've got a couple of VCarve tool paths. This is just really basic stuff. Selected all the H's. I don't know why I decided to make 2 different sets of tooling for these. I could have all done them in one. I don't know why I did that, but anyway. So these both tool paths are exactly the same, just I chose different vectors. So it's going to be a start depth of 1/4 inch down, because remember we removed 1/4 inch of material, so I need to go down to the surface of my puck. I'm just going to use a 60-degree 60-degree V-bit, 1/2 inch shank. We're not going to use any clearance tools at all. We're just going to go ahead and just V-carve that right in the surface. We'll calculate that, and we'll preview that visible tool path. That looks great. And then we can go ahead and preview the A's, which like I said, is the same tool path. Just doing it again. And there we have it. Now that is all you need to do to cut the actual frame of this thing, we'll call it. Now again, I wanted to point out some of the stuff that you can change and modify depending on what materials you're going to use, what kind of tools you have. Maybe the way you're going to put it together. If you decide you're going to do things a little bit different, then you'll have that there for you, and hopefully you can go back to this video if you need it. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to go take a look at that second cut file. So I'm just going to get rid of me for a second here, and we are going to go File, and we are going to close this. Thank you. File, and we're going to open a new file, and we're going to go with the bottom cut file, and we'll open that up. Again, you're going to see the information here that we want you to read and make sure you understand. Make sure you look at all the tooling again, go over it all, make sure it's safe and appropriate for your machine. And let's take a look at this job setup. It's the same size job, width and height. It's just the thickness that has changed. I decided to use a 1/4 inch piece of material for the bottom of this. Again, like Mark said, maybe some plexiglass would be kind of cool on the bottom of this. That would look really sharp with some lighting. I think somebody had mentioned underneath it. That would look really, really cool. So that would be really nice in the end. I think that would be fun to see, Mark. Can't wait to see that. And so that'd be something to think about, okay? And everything else is set up exactly the same as the other file is, and we're just going to click OK, or OK at the end. It's going to recalculate the toolpaths for me, but let's not worry about that. Let's look at what we have for layers. There are 3 layers. Now, the bottom layer is turned off. If you turn it on, this is just the outside of the board. So sort of the skeleton of the board. That way I could line up our logo where I want it to be and it not be covered up by anything. So if I hide my layers manager there, you'll see that it's spaced out well there, but you don't really need that. Might be helpful for you in the end. Okay. Now that we have that, that's great. It's really basic, nothing too fancy here. We've got 2 different tool paths. We have V-carving. A V-carving tool path is just a selection of this logo, which, just for the record, I created this logo in VCarve desktop. It's not rocket science. The font is QandA, so you can swap out the V and you can put your own initial in there if you'd like to. Go for it. Have fun with it. Do what you like, or not even bother to cut it. Maybe you want to put your family name, or I don't know, Camp 2010 or something like that on it. I'm not sure. Whatever you want to put in there, you can do. But it's a very basic V-carving tool path. Nothing special. Just cutting it right into the surface. Calculate that. We can preview that visible tool path, and that's it. It's not too fancy. The second tool path is going to be our board cutout, which is just the board, and you'll see that I added in some tabs. You may or may not decide to use tabs depending on how your fixturing method is. You might want to use double-sided tape, or maybe you've got a fancy vacuum table. That would be great. Nothing crazy here. We're going to cut down through that 1/4 inch by 0.02 of an inch. Use that same end mill that we've been using. Outside the line, like I said, make sure you check that. No separate last pass. I added in my custom tab placement where I want them to be. And we are going to go ahead and we name that and we calculate that up. Again, warning, no sweat. We know we're going to cut through, preview that visible tool path, and there we have it. There's our board that goes in the bottom. Easy stuff, probably the easiest set of tool paths you're ever going to run. It's not too fancy. So now, let's go on to having a look at how this fits together. Oh shoot, I had these all turned. Anyway, so here's how it fits together. We have the sides, the centerpiece that goes in the middle, the ends that fit on, and then your playing surface at the bottom. I suspect that you're going to want to have a nice shiny surface at the bottom, something that's smooth. Could be something that's plastic, acrylic. Maybe it's going to be a really nicely finished piece of really tightly grained wood that you've polished really nicely with some nice clear coat on there, and everything will slide really nice. These all fit together nice and tight. Again, I did this rendering using Aspire. In Aspire, you can create your toolpath previews into actual components. And then I could export those out as STL models, and I brought them into a third-party piece of software and rendered this out so you could see it all fit together. I find that helps me a lot if I want to fit things together and I want to make sure things fit nicely. So it's kind of a nice way to assemble your final project in the end. I believe Windows has a free 3D assembler built in, so you could export those STLs out and you could use it to fit everything together, especially a job like, which isn't super complicated, but a job that's more complicated, you might want to use that in the future to make sure everything fits if you're a little worried. Okay, that's that. And then you're going to need to source some bungee cord. I found this bungee cord on Amazon. I think it was like £7, so like $10 US, which isn't all that much for the right length that you need. It's the diameter that's important. You want to make sure that you make your holes so that they fit in there nicely, okay, through there. And then my plan was just to tie a knot in the end, and that way they would hold tight in there, and you could use it if you wanted to in the end. But as I did a little more looking around the internet, yikes, I had those all turned on, sorry, I found out some really neat updates to this, okay? One was that this person from thefamilyshop.com made this really nice foldable one, which is kind of neat. It has magnets, I think, by the looks of it, so when you clamshell it up, it closes nice and tight. It has a bag to hold your pucks in, which is great, so that way they don't fall out the bottom through the two holes in the bottom of the box because of the goals there. Looks like it was a fun idea, great for camping and so on. So that's a really neat idea. The next thing I saw was this one, really high-end, nice-looking piece. The two neat things I saw on this one, which I might steal, is that it had some way of scoring on the top. Those little things on the top there, those little pins could come out and you could keep score. Again, with the two different versions that I saw, I guess it might be the best out of 5. Yeah, best out of 5 maybe. Whichever rule set you decide you're going to use. And that's a great way of kind of keeping score. Also, I like the way that they tied the bungee to the end of it. They use sort of one of those things you'd see on the side of a deck, or not a deck, but like a wharf. I'm not sure what you call that. There's a name for it, but I don't remember what it's called. It's like a T-shaped thing. That way you could wrap it around. I suppose maybe the bungee cord, after years of playing this, might end up stretching a bit, so you could re-tighten it on. That was kind of nice, instead of just using the knot system. I thought that was great. And then you could go ahead and figure out a nice way of decorating your pucks. And this was great. This person used these, it looks like recycled skateboard decking. For the middle of this, looks really sharp. But also I had seen online that some people make the pucks, they'll weight them different on each side so that they fly differently when you shoot them. I guess they might go in an arc instead. So that might make it a little more challenging. So you can think about making your pucks out of 2 pieces, maybe walnut on one side and a lighter material on the other, or something like that. That would make them kind of fly different. Like cut down the middle, not half this way, but down the center, so you have 2 moons stuck together. That would be kind of fun. Also, I saw some other sites that were selling pucks that were like oval shaped to make it really kind of complicated, which would be kind of neat. A cleat, that's what it's called. Thank you very much, everybody. A cleat. Mark, and Edward. Cleat. Yeah, Edward, you would know that, wouldn't you? Sorry. Anyway, I should have known that. So yeah, so there you go. So you can have that little cleat on there and you can tighten those up and so on. So that's kind of neat. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun for me to do, a lot of fun for me to figure out. And like I said, I haven't cut this. So if you choose, and right now, if you log into your V&Co site or go to the community section of vectric.com, you can download this project right now for free. You get all 3 of those files. You can go ahead and make it your own, do what you like with it. If you do cut it and make it, boys, oh boys, I would love it if you would post it in the Vectric user forum or somewhere socially for us. That way we can see it and we can give you kudos. And also, we can see what you're doing with these, which means a lot to us, both Rebecca and I and the whole Vectric team, or Becky and I and the whole Vectric team. Really appreciate that. So if you do that, that would be fantastic. And like I said, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, could you please give this video a thumbs up? If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do, so that way you can come visit us for more of these live events. And you can click the little bell button, and that will give you notifications of when our next posting is, or our next live event is going to be. Train just went by, sorry. Anyway, there we go. So anyway, I hope everybody is keeping very safe. And from all of us here at Vectric, I hope you're still having fun. I hope you're still making it. And above all, you're safe and healthy. Okay? Anyway, see you again next time. Come on back next week. Becky will be here next week for another great live event for you to take part in. Okay? Thanks so much, and see you later.